You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. And now, it's time for the show that breaks down the options market from unusual activity alerts to market analysis, strategy overviews, listener questions, and much more. If it involves puts and calls, then our all-star panel will break it down. It's time to hit the Option Block with your host, Mark Longo from the Options Insider Media Group, and co-hosts Uncle Mike Tosaw from St. Charles Wealth Management, Mark the Greasy Meatball Sebastian from OptionPit.com, Andrew the Rock Lobster, Joe Benazzi from OptionPit.com, and Henry the Flowmaster Schwartz from Cboe. The Option Block is brought to you by Cboe. Cboe's suite of S&P 500 index options, SPX and mini S&P 500 XSP options, allows traders to speculate on the direction of the market, generate income, and hedge for downside protection of their portfolio of stocks. No matter what kind of trader you are, there's plenty of useful information to take the guesswork out of creating your portfolio strategy and to help you make more educated moves in the market. Visit www.cboe.com/SPX today to learn more. The views expressed herein are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of Cboe Global Markets Incorporated or any of its subsidiaries, collectively Cboe. The information provided is for general education and information purposes only. There are important risks associated with transacting in any of the Cboe products or any of the digital assets discussed here. Before engaging in any transactions in those products or digital assets, it is important for market participants to carefully review the disclosures and disclaimers contained at www.cboe.com/US_disclaimers. These products and digital assets are complex and are suitable only for sophisticated market participants. These products involve the risk of loss, which can be substantial and, depending on the type of product, can exceed the amount of money deposited in establishing the position. Market participants should put at risk only funds they can afford to lose without affecting their lifestyle. And now, get ready to hit the Option Block.
All right, everybody. That music means we are back. It is Thursday. It is noon Central. It is 1 p.m. Eastern. Do you know what's going on in the world of options? Well, let's find out together, shall we? It is time once again for the Option Block. My name, of course, Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com. Hope you're having a good trading week. A lot to sink your teeth into out there. A lot of earnings, a lot of macro and geopolitical developments. A lot of things going on to keep you interested, keep you busy. Of course, if you want to stay engaged with all that fun, head on over to the pro, theoptionsinsider.com/pro. Get your pro Q&As. Get your options oddities after vol views to round out your week with just a mega dose. You like the odd block? We come at you with both barrels on options oddities. A lot of fun content and a lot of great unusual activity. There are giveaways, live streams. You can heckle everybody in the live. It's always fun. And of course, coming up, man, we already just gave away the January Pro Trading Crate. February, square in the sights now. So get your name in the hat for the February Pro Trading Crate. Theoptionsinsider.com/pro is the place to go to learn more. Also, your own podcast feed. Lots of good stuff over there. Check it out over there on the Pro as we check out who's joining us on the old program today. First, let's go out to the quiet, the tranquil, some might say sleepy hinterlands of Chicago, where we are joined once again by the uncleest of Mikes, Mr. Uncle Mike Tosaw from St. Charles Wealth Management. Uncle Mike, welcome back to the program, sir.
Always a pleasure to be here for the Thursday show. Let's block some options.
All right, let's block some options indeed. And your lead blocker on the program today, Mr. Uncle Mike. is our good pal, the Flowmaster himself, a.k.a. Mr. Henry Schwartz, beaming in from the hallowed halls of Cboe East. Mr. Flowmaster, welcome to the Thursday program. To you as well, sir.
Well, thank you very much. I'm happy to be here. I was actually in Orlando this morning finishing up at a conference down there, but I made it back in time, and I'm excited to get into lots of options activity with you guys.
Quite the whirlwind adventure. So you were riding Space Mountain this morning, and you still made it back in time to talk to us, sir. Well done.
There was no Disney time. It was all business.
All business. All right. As we keep on rolling, head right on into the trading block.
It's time to break down the latest topics, trades, and trends in the world of options. It's time for the Trading Block.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Trading Block, the portion of the show where we, surprise, talk about what the heck is trading. Can I just say, if I went all the way down to Orlando and I didn't hit a park, I would hear about it from my wife and from my son. They're two hardcore Disney fans and just park fans in general in the family. So I would have no choice. I would be legally obligated to go at least hit a little Space Mountain action or something like that. But I digress. Let's talk about the action hitting the markets out there today. And if you're in the Uncle Mike camp, you like a little bit of green mixed in with your market action, then you're getting a hearty dose out there today, listeners. S&P up about 0.4% right now, hanging out right around 6,075. So well north of that 6K level, but below the all-time highs level as well, up about 0.4%. It has retreated off the highs of the day. It was threatening to hit 7K, or 7K. That'd be something. 6,100. Quite the leap, 7K. 6,100 out there, but kind of has retreated off that since. The Dow up about 0.15% and the NASDAQ up about 0.75%. So all the major indices are still up and now have retreated off their highs for the day. Is this just the pause? Is this the bulls taking a breath before they gore upward yet again with those blood-drenched horns? Or is it perhaps the worm turning yet again? We have seen a lot of intraday swings in both directions so far this year, so could be playing out yet again. Our old pal VIX Cash was at a 15.5 when we kicked off the show, puts it down half a point. Starting to firm up a little bit now that the markets are turning a little bit off their highs at about a 15.60, which puts it down about 0.4 point right now. And our old pal, the vol of vol itself, a.k.a. VVIX, at a 98, down about 2 points from where it was this time last week. All right, a lot to unpack. Let's go around the horn the opposite of the way we started. The guy who says, he claims there was no Space Mountaining in his morning, but I don't know. I'll ask him offline, listener. We'll see what the true answer is. Mr. Flowmaster, sir, while you were busy escaping from Orlando, what was catching your eye out there today?
Well, what's pretty interesting to me is, we're in a pretty quiet and relatively bullish kind of market setup, right? I mean, the broad averages are up 2 or 3% year to date. Okay, it's only the sixth week of the year. VIX under 16, and even flirting with 15. And we are, I guess, going into a 3-day weekend, so there'll be a little bit of an effect there. But my colleague Mandy Zhu wrote about it in her weekly macro note. The market just keeps shrugging off these kind of geopolitical little earthquakes that are going on, and right now the view of kind of what's going on in Washington and even with the global conflicts is very positive. And people seem to be really looking at things through a pretty optimistic lens. Now that does make me a little bit nervous because we know how strong the market performance was last year and the year before. So we're sitting on some really outsized market gains. But I saw something about how the January effect basically says that after a good January we'll probably have a good year, and it just really feels like there's a little bit of complacency sneaking into the market. Especially when I look at movers in Trade Alert, which just shows the biggest movers, and it's just littered with things that are up or down 10 to 20%. That to me shows that we're kind of in a pretty exuberant time. So, among the top 100 names today, we've got, a lot of names up 5-6%, including Robinhood, which is up, right now it's up 12%. It was up even a little bit more than that on earnings. So, it looks to me like investors are just kind of happy and looking for places to put their money to work.
Speaking of places to go to work, what were you working on in Orlando, sir? What was the big show down there? Inquiring minds want to know.
There was an asset managers conference. I was actually lucky enough to be on a panel with the trader who runs the JP Morgan Hedged Equity Fund, and then somebody from BlackRock and UBS and ProShares. And we were basically talking about kind of the evolution of the options market for an end user community who really isn't, they're not as focused on the listed options world as we are for sure. So we're just doing a little bit of education and networking.
How can someone not be aware of the listed options? Pshaw, sir. Heresy, I say. As we go around the horn to the Uncle List of Mikes, he's aware of the listed options world. Mr. Uncle Mike, sir, what's catching your eye in, at least for right now, still an Uncle Mike type of day, sir?
No doubt about it. Just to kind of add to what the Flowmaster is saying, there does seem to be, for a day when the S&P 500 is up, what are we up, like 0.5%, it does seem like, not just today per se, but just in general, there's a lot of things that are up a lot and there's a lot of things that are down a lot. So we have Tesla up over 4% on the day today. There's also other stocks that have just gotten beaten up a lot the last couple of weeks. And so it's unique in that there's not a lot of stocks that are all up 0.5%, which would match the S&P 500, but there's a lot of stocks that are up more than that, but also down more than that to kind of create this average. So it's pretty interesting to watch, like looking at the individual names. Now, the other thing that's lighting up my tape is that we had an announcement this week that inflation is not exactly as in check as we had hoped it would. And so with that, yesterday on the 12th, we had a sell-off in the bond market, and we're almost back to where we were on Tuesday. So buyers have come in when the bonds have gone down. And so what I often wonder is, well, I don't wonder this, I know this. What is the real inflation outlook? Is it the numbers that the government releases, or is it based upon what the bond markets actually do with people who have trillions of dollars on the line? And in my opinion, it's more choice B. And so what's interesting to me is that we had an announcement to where it looked like inflation was higher than it was supposed to be, bond market sell off. But today, one day later, buyers come in. So that makes me think that maybe we are in a pretty stable spot right now in the bond market. So we'll see where that goes with it. Obviously, I could be wrong. We could have an 8% yield on the 10-year tomorrow. You never know, although I don't think that's going to happen, but you never know. But it does appear that we are in a more stable bond market than you would have thought yesterday with that news. In terms of some other individual names, the main one that I said that's probably lighting up my tape would be Tesla, up 4% on the day. And other than that, that's what I'm seeing today.
Let's see what the rest of the market is seeing or indeed showing out there, listeners. Is it a banger day? I guess I'll shrug my shoulders. I'll say, kind of depends where you're hanging your hat, as it always does out here, listeners. Let's kick things off in VIX land. VIX looking mildly sleepy. I would say they're up, they're awake, they're out of bed, but they're still kind of rubbing the sleep from their eyes. Only 325 on the tape right now, so decent numbers. But the ADV actually coming back down a little bit after a few sleepy days. We were back north of 900K, got to about 925 or so. Back to 858 right now, still respectable. So 325 looks a little bit better when you see it in that light, that the ADV coming in a little bit, but still's got a ways to go just to hit that 850 level out there, listeners. So interesting stuff out there in VIX land. By the way, what's the big dog out there in VIX out there today? Looks like we got some March action out there in VIX. In particular, it's the March 20s putting up about 26,000 contracts, and the March 23s putting up 21,000. And then number 3, we got the May 30s with about 20,000 contracts. And not a ton lighting up the tape out there in VIX land. SPY, pretty much right where we expect it to be this time of day, about a little over 4.5 million, about 4.55 million. The ADV, 8.17 million out there. The S looking mildly heavy, 1.9 million contracts on the tape for the S. Again, we usually expect around 1 3/4, so a little bit extra, a little bit of a cherry sprinkled on top there for the S. The ADV, 3.31 million. Small cap, 790. That's about where we expect them now, given the fact that their ADV was right around 1.4 million. Actually, it has come in a little bit, about 1.34 million right now. Again, it was about 1.7, almost 1.8 million not too long ago. That's nigh on an unsustainable level for small caps, as we have seen. Of course, it wasn't that long ago, 1 million contracts a day was kind of unsustainable for small caps. So they're very much in a different volume regime right now. And the Q's almost exactly where we expect them to be. Actually, a little bit heavy. They're usually right around 2.25 million this time of the show, at 2.5 million right now. So looking pretty robust out there in the Q's. Well past halfway to their ADV of 4.11 million contracts. So let's go out to the single names. Now, I know a lot of you are wondering, is it a banger single name day? And the answer is, again, it's respectable. It's not sleepy dog days of summer. It's also not explosive Rocktober or Fed Day or something like that. It's kind of right in the middle there. $3.15 is what it cost you to break into the top 10 today. That gets us to our old pal Meta. In fact, we got a lot of the usual suspects with a couple of exceptions out there today. Our old pal Meta taking a break today off 561, or about 0.75%, trading 719 3/4. It's had a pretty wide range today. 727.5 to the upside, 718 pretty much exactly to the downside. So, wow. Interesting. Maybe the old playbook of laying off people at Meta, which worked so well in the past, maybe that's kind of run its course. Either way, Meta daring to turn red. It's still north of 700. It could sell off 600 handles, listeners, and still be above where it was not that long ago. So quite the run has been on in Meta for the last year and change. Number 9, it's Baba. Good old Alibaba. They've been popping in to our top 10 a lot of late out there as well. China, obviously, very much on the radar of everybody. Baba, number 9, 321 on the tape, 117.93 off about 40 cents. They've had a decent range today as well. 119.30 to the upside, 114 3/4 to the downside. So Baba having a decently wide range, hanging out in the middle of it right now. Number 9, Baba, 321. Number 8, the subject of our question of the week this week. This is Palantir. You love it or you hate it. Either way, it was at $68 or so not that long ago, sometime this year. And now it's at 115, so nearly double that. So just a wild time in Palantir, selling off a little bit today, off about 1 3/4 or about 1.5%. We'll get to all the Palantir fun in a little bit when we get to the question of the week. Number 8 today, 456. I'll just say that PE, pretty juicy in Palantir right now. Hint, hint. Number 7, AMD, popping 112 1/3, up about 2/3 or about 0.6%. Had a range of 111.17 to the downside, 114.60 to the upside. So pretty decent range out there as well, about 343 in terms of range, hanging out close to the lower end of that range right now. For AMD, number 7, some interesting action in the chips today. We'll get to all that fun in a little bit when we get to some more names. Number 6, the name Henry was just talking about, good old Robinhood, 62.60, up 660 or about 12% today. Popping off good news. Looks like a lot of their crypto action is what's driving a lot of that out there today. Up 440% over the past year. Yeah, a lot of that coming on the back of crypto. Yeah, interesting stuff here for Robinhood. Again, another name kind of like Palantir where we got run over selling 10 puts. Not that long ago. I remember it was almost like clockwork. You could sell the 10 puts for around $1. It was a pretty good do. As the kids say, it was a good wheel candidate. And if you held on to that wheel, you're up 440%. Good run here. 62.30 up nearly 640 today out there. So a good run for Rob. Let's see, what are they up year to date? They're up 22.5 handles or nearly 58% just year to date. They kicked off the year 39.44. So a good run for Robinhood. Number 6, 560 on the tape. A lot of names have already had a good year, and we're already just midway through February, listeners. So kind of wild out here. Number 5, speaking of wild years, SMCI, 720 on the tape. 42.84, up 316 or about 8%. It's had a range of 37.5 to the downside, 42.80 to the upside. So over $5. My goodness. Quite the run here for SMCI. Why is it up? More buyers than sellers out there today. Listen, this one's one of the wild names. 720 for number 5 on the tape. So already up to 720 at number 5. That's respectable. Number 4 is the Fruit Company, 241.20, up 430 or nearly 2%. So quite the pop here for the Fruit Company today, hanging out near the upper portion of its range. It's had a range of 235 and about a half and a high of 241.61. So quite the range. You don't see Apple having a nearly $6 range very often. So interesting. Number 4, the Fruit Company, 958 on the tape for them. Number 3, my old pals of Intel, 24 3/4, up about $4.50 or about 22%. Rumors of some more love from the administration for domestic chip manufacture on the AI front. That's translating into some Intel love. Intel's having a good run, up 216 or about almost 10% just today. On the year, they're up about 22%. Again, a lot of names already having good years, and we're already through early February. If you go back just to last Friday, listeners, this name's up over $5 or about 30%. So 30% since last Friday. So a good run here, a good year in the last week for Intel. Number 3, 1.37 million. When's the last time we saw Intel putting up over 1 million contracts? It's been a while. Listen, that means you know what we have to do. We have to fire up the old Flowmaster machine, see what's lighting it up out here. You can check this out for yourselves, listeners. Cboe.com/RMA to begin your journey to the dark side. If you did that, you would see that it's the Feb 25s dominating the tape today. 52,000 of those bad boys, followed by the Feb 25s expiring today. 50,000 of those also going up. Firing tomorrow on Valentine's Day. So a lot of very near-dated action. 25's been a strike we've been threatening. We also have a bunch of, looks like synthetics going up. The Feb 22 versus the March 24. So probably a bit of a roll going up out there as well. That's accounting for, looks like close to 100,000, about 85, 90,000 contracts there. But still, over 1 million contracts for Intel. That is nothing to sneeze at. Number 3, number 2, and number 1, you could probably guess. Number 2, it's Tesla, 350 and about almost 351, up about $14 today. So they've had a nice run. The range was 342.85 on the downside, 358.69 on the upside, 351 right now. Good for number 2, 207. They've had a rough year. They're still off about 7.5%. Most other names have been rallying hard, even though they have rebounded from their lows this week of 328. But yeah, they were north of 400 not that long ago. Yeah, they were 428 on January 15th. They sold off exactly $100 to 328 this Tuesday. And since then, they have rebounded about $22. So funny how that works, listeners. Number 2, Tesla, 2.07 million. And the big dog today, NVIDIA, 134 3/4, up about $3.50 or 2 3/4%. Again, all of this talk of domestic chip production and indeed firms doubling down on spending a lot of money on AI. Usually good news for NVIDIA, even though they are off their highs of the day of 136.5. But they got as low as 131.17, so not quite there yet. Number 1, NVIDIA, 2.3 million contracts on the tape for NVIDIA, listeners. So a pretty wild day across the board on the single names, from 315,000 on the number 10 to 2.3 million. Quite the range out here. A lot of that, of course, driven by, we do still have earnings popping off. We had Mickey D's on Monday, Shopify and Coca-Cola and Marriott and DoorDash. Another one crushed it, DoorDash crushing it. Lyft also on Tuesday. Wednesday, CVS, Reddit, some name called Robinhood, and Cisco. Today we got John Deere, we got Crocs, we got Duke Energy, a.k.a. the Duck, Sony, Coinbase, you may have heard of them, and Twilio. I'm guessing if Robinhood had good crypto numbers, Coinbase probably going to be pretty good as well. DraftKings, by the way, if you want to check out Coinbase, what they're doing on the derivatives front, check out the Monday episode of the Crypto Rundown. I had the Flowmaster's nemesis, Mr. Boris, running the Coinbase derivatives exchange on there. We talked all about crypto derivatives. He said he was mad that Henry wouldn't let him talk about it on the panel. So he got it all out with me on the Crypto Rundown on Monday. Check it out if you are so inclined there, listeners. Also got DraftKings popping off. And let's see, you want to check the website for the latest and greatest earnings move results, and earnings season reports, listeners. Right now we are hanging out for the season at let's see, exactly 106%. So we've actually come in quite a bit. We were 133 in the first week and a half, but we know it's going to change. The long-term average still 117, so we are actually below that right now, which is kind of interesting. Week 4, only 63 names have reported as of the time of this report, but that was down to 75%. That's going to change as more names obviously report, listeners, but that was kind of dragging down the numbers. When we update the numbers for names like Robinhood and stuff, I have a feeling that's going to increase a little bit. In the meantime, you can check that out for yourselves, listeners. Head on over to the website, theoptionsinsider.com. Click on the Options News and Articles tab as we continue our journey right on into the Odd Block.
It's time to break down the most interesting, unusual, and downright questionable options activity that's been identified by theoptionsinsider.com. It's time for the Odd Block.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Odd Block, the portion of the show where we get weird. We get wild. Mr. Flowmaster, before we start there, does that make you angry that your nemesis in life, Mr. Boris, came on our crypto show and talked a whole mess of smack about you, sir?
Well, it certainly means I gotta put that to the top of my playlist. No, I love Boris. I've known him since he basically hand built the ISE, at the turn of the century, turn of the millennium. But that's great that he joined you, and I'm excited to listen.
It is kind of wild. I will say it is kind of wild to be talking futures with Boris. It seems wrong, but in some ways it's also kind of right, because that's what his gig. He's talking about WTI futures and gold. I mean, how far we've all come, sir.
Absolutely.
In a short period of time. But let's get out to what the Flowmaster spotted out there today. Let's go out to a name we haven't talked about in a little bit. This is Grab Holdings, aka kind of the Uber of Singapore over there. Ticker symbol Grab, appropriately enough. 474 today, off about a quarter, about 5%. So they're not having a great day out there today. Apparently more sellers than buyers. Looks like some big institutional holders may have decreased their holdings out there. Either way, off about a quarter or about 5% today. If you go back a full year, though, they're still having a good year. They're up about $1.50 or 43%. They were trading $3.30 a year ago. They got as low as just about $3, $2.98 back in March of last year. And of course, they had a wild run during the election. They went from October 17th, 362. They shot all the way up to, looks like they got about 572, almost exactly $1 north of where they are right now. Then they sold off in January. Remember that sell-off we had mid-January? They got to about 436. Then they rallied them again. They got up north of $5, 511, just about a week and change ago. And ever since then, they've kind of been back. So they sold it off again to 456. This was a wild couple of months out here in Grab. All that a long way around to saying, Mr. Flowmaster, what'd you spot out here in the Singaporean Uber today, sir?
Yeah, so this I did not trade this because I was busy yesterday, but it definitely is a standout amount of activity in there that printed yesterday. We saw over 310,000 contracts traded, and it was almost all calls. It was 290,000 calls. That's almost 15 times the average daily volume. And as you said, this is a kind, slightly funky overseas, new economy tech firm. And it actually also kind of littered through the trade of the day report that I was looking at. So, the biggest winners yesterday, there were a couple of Tesla puts and Intel calls, but in the top 10, I think 3 of the positions by percentage return or by absolute profit actually are these Grab call buyers. The other thing that kind of stands out is that it was really mostly opening. It wasn't a lot of, scalping that we sometimes see. Net opened 233,000 calls. So, most of this flow was opening. The biggest chunk was a buyer of 15,000 of the March 5 calls for 60 cents. But there were a lot of other very large trades. So by the end of the day, what's interesting, the stock, it did lift in that first half hour. But But really where they made a lot of their money was in the Vega. So the vol in grab was up about 25 points across the board yesterday. I think as people just kind of really started to back off and say, whoa, maybe something is going on here, because that's a lot of big activity. So the vol went from basically like 60 up to about 80 in the short dated options. And so these trades looked great. Like, looked like it was, $140,000 winner on the Jan 5 calls that they bought. And, kind of everything was in that like 60 grand to 100 grand zone. Now, most of it seems to be coming back out today. So, maybe there was a chance to, because the stock's back down to 475, but also the vol's a lot lower too. So maybe this was kind of just a flash in the pan. Vol's back down about 8 or 9 points. But we see plenty of kind of spikes of unusual activity. This one just was, kind of so big that you can't ignore it. But it is interesting. It looks to me like right now they're probably sucking wind on most of these purchases.
Yeah, wild times out there in the Singaporean Uber. Were you playing this one, listeners? Do you like the stock? Have you slung the stock? Have you slung some options on this wild stock? It's kind of been all over the place over the last 3-4 months, so you've had options, pun intended, at many different levels out there if you are intrigued. But color me intrigued. We'll probably be talking about it on Oddities, maybe a lot of weird stuff going on in grab of late. Speaking of weird stuff, let's keep the Flowmaster Weirdo Palooza going. Let's go out to Omnicom Group, ticker symbol OMC, an American global media marketing and corporate communications holding company. Say all of that 5 times fast, listeners. A ticker symbol OMC, trading 81.25, kind of unched on the day right now. They've had a bit of a range, though. Their low was 80.46. The high was 81.70. Again, hanging out right around 81.25, right in the middle of that range right now. On the year, they've kind of been all over the place. They're actually now with their big sell-off over the last, let's say, month and change, a couple of months, they are now net down on the year, but they were looking pretty good. They were $85 when a year ago. They rallied it all the way to 107 back in late November, early December. Then they literally fell off a cliff on December 6th. They went from 103.5 to, on the 9th, $92 and change. And then they kept selling off. They got down to $82, very close to where they are right now on January 10th. Then they tried to rally it, listeners, 88.33, and then they've kind of just fallen off a cliff again, right back down to 81.25. I know we have talked about this one before, but it's been a little bit here for good old Omnicom Group. That said, Mr. Flowmaster, what did you spot out here in OMC, sir?
Yeah, so this is a pretty distinct little bit of aggressive call buying. Well, the bigger block that I saw was a 2,400 lot of these March 85 strike calls that were bought for $1.10. This is when the stock was at 81.5. But when I dug into the strike itself, I could actually see maybe about 100 lot bought shortly before that, like less than a minute earlier. And for that, the earlier piece, they only paid 98 cents to $1. So this is a situation where basically a large institutional customer, a hedge fund basically, goes to a dealer and says, I want to buy these, and they sweep the floor, or they sweep the screens, and then they kind of put up the rest after basically they get everything they can at lower prices. The stock initially did spike a little bit, but it's come back. But I would point out, vol's a little bit higher, and the skew is a little bit flatter up to the call side as well. So it does look like a decent, like $250,000 bullish bet, on something happening. I mean, these are Marches, so they have, about 2 months until they expire. So there's time there. I don't know if that would include earnings or not, but it looks like earnings aren't supposed to be until April. So, this one I think I'll keep an eye on. I don't know if I would trade it, but I'd certainly look for, if any additional call buying comes in, then I would think you might see some reaction in the stock, just because that first 2,400 lot the stock did get goosed about 20 cents.
Yeah, it's kind of been a wild couple of months out here in OMC. So if you're looking for a little bit of action, listeners, maybe OMC is your huckleberry. I know what Uncle Mike's huckleberry is. It's silver. So maybe let's head out there really quickly as well. No, not his beloved SLV, listeners. I do believe this is a newcomer. I don't think we've had this one certainly not on the odd block before. This is MAG Silver Corp, ticker symbol MAG, MAG, trading right now 1692, kind of unched right now. On the year, though, they've had a good run. As you can imagine, silver, most precious metals have had a pretty good year as well. It was 834 a year ago, so it has more than doubled. It's up about 103% now on the year. They rallied it all the way to actually about 18 and a quarter. They got over 18 back right around Halloween, listeners. But then it plummeted post-election. It got down to 1330 in December 30th, actually. So it's kicked off the year. It's actually had a good run year to date. It's up 17.5%, 2.5 handles just year to date, listeners. So again, another name having a good year just so far year to date. And then hanging out right now, like we said, 1692 or so. And what do we spot out there today, Mr. Uncle Mike? Looks like somebody is sharing your little bit longer term optimism for all things silver. This is obviously a silver mining and exploration name, listeners. They said, AUG 20s, how are they? They got $1.20 at $1.35. They said, you know what? I will pay $1.35 4,000 times. This is about a 47 vol if you're interested. The stock was pretty much exactly here, $16.98, so a few cents away. You're obviously going to get some earnings between now and August. Your next announcement is on March 19th. So you're probably going to get two between now and August expiration. So maybe that changes your calculus a little bit if you look all the way out to the 20. And now the 20 handle, that is kind of optimistic. Just looking at this chart for the past year, the highest MAG has gotten is 18 and a quarter. So you need this thing to get well north of that for these calls to be relevant. You got some time, though. So, Uncle Mike, the question is to you as our resident silver bull. Are you a fan of these AUG 20s for $1.35? Do you like the duration? You like the price? Or is that just a little bit of a bridge too far for you, sir?
It's a little bit of a bridge too far for me. I would say if it was out to the next year, I would actually consider this a decent spec trade, but I would be a little bit uncomfortable going just to August at this point, especially on something that optimistic.
And since we're speaking about silver, well, first off, Mr. Flowmaster, if you have any thoughts on these MAG calls, are you a big MAG fan? By all means, let us know. And then B, sounds like you got some interesting news for SLV options traders out there, sir. Why don't you lay it on us?
Yeah, I do have some small positions in gold miners, and maybe I've been in and out of PAAS. I think they mine for silver, don't they? But I'm not kind of a metals person. But one thing I did notice, I saw a memo go by. They're going to extend the closing for the SLV options, so options on the SLV ETF, till 4/15. I believe it starts at the end of next week. Now GLD already goes till 4/15, so we see some of these commodity-based ETFs already trade till 4/15. I actually tried to make a list, and it's a little bit messy. Like USO does, but UNG doesn't. But it's funny, right? Because we there's lots of chat about extending hours and overnight trading, and all the exchanges now have basically all the stock exchanges have announced that they will be somewhat 24-hour trading at some point, but there's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be kind of built for that because of some of the rules. But to see, more ETFs trading till 4/15, it's kind of baby steps towards, these longer trading hours that people seem to like.
It's coming, baby. It's all going 24/7 soon. I just saw the release this morning. Schwab's going 24 hours for all their retail pretty soon too. So it's coming. Whether you like it or not, listeners, it's coming. I'm going to cheat. I'm going to do one more here. I'm going to do another bit of your homework for you, Mr. Flowmaster, because I like you. Let's keep going. Let's keep the Flowmaster Odd Block 2024 party going. Listen, let's go out to Peloton. This is the name. I've said it before. It was probably about a year ago, maybe a little less, maybe a little more, where we talked about going into Peloton earnings, ticker symbol, of course, PTON. The stock was right around $3, $3.10 or so, and they were paying 30 cents. They were 30-cent bid for the at-the-money puts, the 3 puts, with less than a week to go, as I recall, maybe about a week. So you could get a straight 3% right off the top if you just sold those puts. And we asked our audience, are you brave enough to sell those puts? Is 10% for a couple of days work, is that good enough for you in Peloton? Or you're just too scared? And the majority of our audience was way too scared to blast away at those puts. Well, spoiler alert, that would have been a good do if you got the stock put to you. I'm not sure if you would have. The stock, I think, moved north after them. You would have kept your 30 cents, though, because it's been a good year here in the old PTON. A year ago, it was $4.45, so it might have been a little over a year ago, but not that long. Actually, no, got down to $3 in April, so maybe it was right around the April timeframe that we did that poll. But yeah, it's had a good run up, $5.20 or 116% over the past year, trading $9.66. So maybe this is the beginning of the turnaround everyone's hoped for in Peloton forever. But Mr. Flowmaster, back on the episode from last August 22nd. What a dark day. Nothing good ever happened on August 22nd, listeners. But I digress. Mr. Flowmaster came in, and he was looking at some upside. Let's see, the stock on August 22nd, where do we go out? The stock closed at $4.50, and you were talking about a September. That's an interesting one. It's a 3.5, 4.5 call spread. At that point, it was pretty much in the money. They traded it into earnings. I think it must have gone up maybe earlier in the week. They traded for 24 cents. At that point, when you talked about it on the August 22nd show, it was in the money 30,000 times. So $2.2 million gain on that, buddy. So the stock ended up closing on expiration in August, listeners, $4.90. So by my math, listeners, that $1 call spread went out for a full $1. So they made all of their juicy 76 cents. Mr. Flowmaster, sir, do you recall this pretty juicy Peloton spread, and any other thoughts on the run this name's been on ever since?
Well, I got hurt in Peloton because there's some trades you vividly remember, and I believe towards the end of COVID, they had an earnings come out, and it was bad, and that stock had exploded into COVID, right? I think it got cut in half. I kind of remember going from like 60 to 30 something, and I bought it, and I believe it then went down to about 15. So I lost some money in that name, and I'm not a fan ever since, although, in this case, it does look like, it's come back from the brink, and, maybe somebody, maybe they'd just like to do their Peloton workouts, but they weren't afraid to put some money into it and, use options for the, kind of the leverage that you can get in some of these structures, and do pretty well at it. So, stocks around $10, almost back into double-digit territory, which is kind of where I think it was over 10 briefly in December. Maybe not. We actually might be heading for a new high that would put it kind of the highest since middle of 2023.
The Flowmaster sounds like he's intrigued, wants to get back in to his beloved Peloton. That's your Cisco. That's Uncle Mike has Cisco. We all have that name, and for you, it is Peloton. Speaking of you folks, listeners, let's see what you folks have on the brain. A little bit of the old mail block.
It's time to take your seat on the All-Star panel as we read your emails, tweets, Facebook messages, website comments, and much more. It's time for the mail block.
Just catching up with our live chat. I've been busy hosting. Listen, I don't have a chance to always read along with the chat, but a lot of chat about weather futures in our live chat. Interesting. Yeah, maybe. That reminds me of back in the day. On the Cboe, we used to always trade snow futures through the CME. That was kind of a big active market. Everyone's celebrating the fact that they got a snow day in the chat too. That's why they're able to be listening live. A lot of them out there. So good to see. I don't know if we're going to do a big show on weather futures, their age, but I don't know. But we'll see if they become hot. We'll dive into it. A lot of interesting stuff. Queen also liked our chat with Boris on the crypto rundown. Well, thank you. Yeah, it was kind of fascinating. And I agree with you. Who is it? Nichols out there. It is kind of weird to hear Coinbase coming on talking about WTI futures and gold futures and the potential for equity futures down the road and other things. But that's kind of the world we're in right now. Coinbase expanding into a lot of different products. They made no bones about it. They were gunning for CME out there. So kind of interesting. Now you kind of see when you hear stuff like that, you see why maybe CME was spinning up that FCM license. They didn't mess around. They said it was threats of competition from the crypto space in particular that had them worried. And I think you could see what that is. Nichols also saying Peloton really had its time. Perfect during COVID, but hear as much about them. Don't hear as much about them anymore. Yeah, I bet in hindsight, they wish they sold back during COVID when they were, the only gym open in the country. Man, what a gift they were handed. And they unfortunately did not take it. Going back to the Monday show, listeners, we had some fun talk about Big Bear AI Holdings, ticker symbol BBAI. The stock was active at the time. We also saw some interesting options trading going on out there. The stock was right around $9 at the time. Talked about somebody coming up and just loading up on the Jan 10 calls expiring next year. So the Jan 2026 10 calls, they traded for around $4, $3.90, which was kind of interesting because the stock was a little bit below the 9 handle at the time. So you do the math, listeners, you can buy stock on margin. 50% of that is roughly the price of those calls. So you could buy the stock on margin or you could buy those calls. So we asked you folks, what would you rather do? Buy those calls? Are you going to sell them? It's not a bad buy right at the end of the day, $4 plus the 10 handle, obviously. Or do you prefer to buy the stock at $9? And exactly half of you, 50%, said you'd rather buy the stock. If that's the case, you've had an interesting week. The stock went on a run. It was 6 3/4 last Friday. Obviously, this week it got up to $9. Well, actually, today it hit 10 1/4 this morning before coming back down. So if you bought the stock, you're doing all right. Still $9.50. If you bought the calls, obviously you're doing all right as well, but you have a little bit longer time frame on those. Kind of interesting out there. So our audience not wanting to pay roughly 50% of the value of a stock that was just around that price. You could have bought all the stock you wanted for around $3.90 not that long ago. Now the calls are trading for that. So intriguing times. And then we also had our question of the week last week. We asked you folks, I know tariffs obviously on everyone's brain, everyone's radar right now. We said, do you think we'll be dealing with the fallout of these tariffs for some time? How long do you foresee these impacting the markets? Is it just a tempest in the teapot? Is it going to be through Q1? Is it going to be through Q2 or maybe Q3 and beyond? And about a third of you, 31.3%, said it's a tempest in a teapot. So if that's the case, the teapot's still brewing right now because we had obviously a lot of tariff news this week here, listeners. So interesting stuff. Our audience is usually a little bit darker of mind than that, but you think it's going to be a tempest in a teapot. Who am I to second guess you folks? 25% for number 2, short-term impact through Q1, and then a tie for third, about 22% each for midterm through Q2 and through Q3 and beyond. So, by that math, over half of you think it'll be done before Q1, and almost half think beyond Q2. So our audience kind of split there. And speaking of a split audience, let's get out to our actual question of the week right now that I want to get all of my cohorts' thoughts on it as well. I mentioned it earlier in the show. I said we're going to come back to it. It is Palantir. You love it or you hate it. Very few are indifferent to it right now. But Palantir, as you mentioned, currently has a PE north of 600. Let's see. It's selling off a little bit today, but let's see what it is right now. Let's get the exact number, 619 to be precise, listeners. We said at that level, you don't really have to be a strict market fundamentalist to maybe stroke your chin and say, which leads into the question of, do those magical letters known as AI, obviously Palantir, very much in the AI movement, the AI vanguard, listeners, do they trump the other 2 letters that people used to rely on for valuations known as PE? So we gave you 4 choices. AI beats PE, or you know what? No, sir, for you, PE beats AI, or who cares if it goes up at the end of the day? Or are you thinking it's time to buy some Palantir puts? Uncle Mike, we shall go to you first, sir. What are your thoughts on Palantir or any name that has a PE north of 600? And then B, which way do you think our audience is going, sir?
Well, I think our audience is going with who cares so long as it goes up. But this is going to actually take you for a loop, Mark. I actually own Palantir for some clients.
Ooh,
and
good run.
The way with which I'm playing it, though, is when I said this is the year of the collar, I meant this is the year of the collar. And that what I like about Palantir is that if you go roughly a year out, you can buy a put at the money and sell a call out of the money for the same price. And it essentially becomes an indexed annuity on Palantir. And let's say it goes way up. Well, obviously, that's a good thing. The client will make money. But if it goes way down, that's where I think it gets interesting, because this happened to me with Facebook a few years ago, back when they started the metaverse. I was in a collar on Facebook and I just crapped the bed. And so what I was able to do is, on a long-term holding, and this is stuff that I put in my clients' safe section of their portfolio. In the safe section of the portfolio, I bought back the call. So I basically had a deep in the money put, and I was long Facebook a while ago. And of course, Facebook came back, and we ended up making way more money on it than we originally intended to, because we were able to buy that put or that short call back for a couple pennies. And so what I think Palantir is an excellent stock for is something like that, to where obviously if it goes straight down, I think my client risk is like 1% of their holdings or 1% of their position. But if it goes up, we make money. If it stays the same, we break even. If it goes way down, then we have the opportunity to essentially have an out of the money call with no risk or minimal risk in the safe section of the client portfolio. So I think for in 2025, the year of the collar, Palantir is a great thing to take a look at, regardless of how you feel on the stock. You just have to want it to move. And if you catch it in the right movement, you can get some pretty nice profit for some pretty minimal risk, I think.
You must have been pretty busy rolling those calls of the last couple of weeks, sir.
Just sitting on them.
Oh, you must have sold some pretty far out of the money calls, sir. Well done to you. Let's keep rolling out here. Listen, let's go out to Mr. Flowmaster, sir. What are your thoughts on the north of 600 PE beast that is Palantir, and then which way you think our audience is going, sir?
Well, you know what? I'm lucky enough to own some Palantir too. Not because I'm smart, but I think because there must have been some option flow that put me into it a while ago, and I've just kind of held on to it. My view is generally keep things until you find something else to do with the money. But I like where Andrew's coming from in terms of, collars in names that have a high call skew, right? A high call wing. You can get close to a credit or even actually get a real credit putting them on. So I think you have to be a little bit choosy about it, so that you don't kind of just collar everything that way, because obviously, part of owning equities is having some of that, massive upside potential, like, really like what we've seen in Palantir in the last 6 months or so. It's an interesting name, right? And, not only is it, data and AI related, but, I kind of also consider it, part of this stratospheric, Silicon Valley and Washington connection that that we're seeing now. I think I'll keep it. I might sell a few calls here and there, especially because you can get a few bucks for for literally a 3 or 4 day call. So if you're at a level where you're comfortable giving away that upside or selling that upside, you can make some income off it. So I like it, and we have some scans where we go and we look for the most extreme upside skew. And in fact, that's one way that I like to just kind of try to gauge how frothy or exuberant the market is. What percentage of the listings out there have positive skew to the call side, and it varies, but there were, the most extreme was during COVID, when almost 1 out of 5 names had an upside call kink. And it's been as low as 7 or 8%. Last I looked, it was kind of in the 11-12% range.
Yeah, hard to argue with the juicy call wing. The stock's not quite double, but pretty darn close to it over the last few months, so quite the run. Our audience, as you might imagine, kind of split on this one, listeners. Right now, 31.7% of you say AI trumps PE. Given these returns, it's kind of hard to argue. Number 2, almost 30% of you, 29.3%, say it's time to load up on some Palantir puts, so you're doing part of the Uncle Mike collar there. And then 26.8% said PE beats AI. Not in this name, but who knows? Maybe a correction is coming. And then 12.2% of you don't care as long as it goes up. Get over there, add options, make your voice heard. A lot of you have chimed in on this one. I like this comment from No More to the Party. He says, normally I'd say PE has to mean something, but then I look at Carvana, and yeah, he's got a great point. When you look at Carvana, listeners, trading 267 right now, That PE is 28,538. So if we say 600 is meaningless, 28,000, that is beyond meaningless. So he does have a point. That's a valid point there. We could have some more room to run on the meaningless PE front. As we keep on rolling, it is time to go around the block.
It's time to tell you what we'll be watching on our trading screens until the next episode. It's time for Around the Block.
All right, let's go around the block, tell you what we're keeping an eye on until our next episode, listen, which is not on Monday. No Monday OB for President's Day, so we will be back with the Flowmaster next Thursday. But we'll start in Uncle Mike land. Uncle Mike, you've already surprised us. I would not have guessed you were long some 600 PE Palantir. So what else you got in store for us to surprise us? So what are you keeping an eye on for the next week?
It just shows the benefit and the flexibility of the option product. Because if it wasn't for options, there's no way I would go anywhere near that stock with a 10-foot pole. Options give you options. And if the fact that I'm in Palantir doesn't prove that, I don't know what will. Just watching to see if we can hit a new all-time high, watching the reaction of the bond market to see if we'll have any follow-through with the buyers tomorrow. And just watching all the macro news because, excuse me, there is stuff going on in Washington. Watching that as well.
And Mr. Flowmaster, sir, what are you keeping an eye on through the long weekend until your next appearance next Thursday?
Well, I really will be keeping a close eye on kind of the macro picture, just because, like I said, my feeling right now is, the performance has been really strong and the market has shrugged off everything, and it wouldn't take much for sentiment to really shift. I think Tesla's also a really interesting name to keep an eye on, right? Because, Elon's getting a lot of pushback. Certainly seemed to be punishing the stock. I think it's down from 400, right? But then you get days like today where you get a pretty good bounce back. So I'll be watching that too, and just really, we're also going to try. I'm going to try to do something very specific on the kind of the premium and the far out of the money puts, not just the 25 delta kind of skew levels in SPX, but actually isolating really just the disaster puts and trying to track what the vols and the premium levels look like there over time.
All right, listeners, that music means we are done for this episode. Not done for today, though. If you want a little more in your lives, I'll be back in a little bit. Talk all things futures options on TWIFO. I'll be joined by Scott from Prosper Trading Academy, so should be intriguing times out there. What's lighting it up? Crude, WTI, ags, nat gas, you never know. Crypto, got to tune in each week to find out. But before we get there, let's go around the horn. Mr. Flowmaster, we'll start with you, sir. If folks want to kick the tires and light the fires on all this cool stuff we've been talking about throughout the show, where should they go? What should they do, sir?
Just head on over to Cboe.com/RMA, and you can see all of our platforms and data offerings, and feel free to ask for a trial. We'll help you out.
There you go. Ask for a trial. The Flowmaster will help you out. Cboe.com/RMA. Very helpful guy, if I do say so myself. And he's sometimes helpful. Mr. Uncle Mike, sir, where should folks go if they want more Uncle Mike help in their lives?
StCharlesWealth.com. Book an appointment with me. I am not afraid of no options. And if you want to figure out safe ways to trade stocks like Palantir, I can help you out.
There you go. You want to buy some 600 PE stocks? Uncle Mike is your man. StCharlesWealth.com, the place to go to learn more. We got to get on out of here. Back again in a little bit with TWIFO. Then back again tomorrow, listeners, to talk all things vol. Who's going to join us on the program? Well, you got to tune in to find out. And then back again one final time for all you pro cool cats and kittens. Because we like you, we're getting wild with options oddities. You want to check that out for yourselves. Only one place to get it, theoptionsinsider.com/pro. Then we're off on Monday for the President's Day holiday, but back again next Thursday, another episode of the Option Block. Stay safe out there, everybody.
The Option Block is brought to you by Cboe. Cboe's suite of S&P 500 index options, SPX and mini S&P 500 XSP options, allows traders to speculate on the direction of the market, generate income, and hedge for downside protection of their portfolio of stocks. No matter what kind of trader you are, there's plenty of useful information to take the guesswork out of creating your portfolio strategy and to help you make more educated moves in the market. Visit www.cboe.com/SPX today to learn more. The views expressed herein are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of Cboe Global Markets Incorporated or any of its subsidiaries, collectively Cboe. The information provided is for general education and information purposes only. There are important risks associated with transacting in any of the Cboe products or any of the digital assets discussed here. Before engaging in any transactions in those products or digital assets, it is important for market participants to carefully review the disclosures and disclaimers contained at www.cboe.com/US_disclaimers. These products and digital assets are complex and are suitable only for sophisticated market participants. These products involve the risk of loss, which can be substantial and, depending on the type of product, can exceed the amount of money deposited in establishing the position. Market participants should put at risk only funds they can afford to lose without affecting their lifestyle. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.